Okay, welcome everybody. It's great to have you all here today. We are waiting on Councilmember Kalos, who we expect any minute, but we are going to get started. I hope everybody is enjoying your universal free lunch. So, you got it, very good. I'm David Sandman, I'm the president and CEO of the foundation. So pleased to welcome you all here for this conversation about making universal school lunch a reality in New York City's public schools. And one of the foundation's current priorities is building healthy communities, which for us means creating access to affordable, nutritious, and healthy and delicious food, and creating more opportunities for physical activity. Most of the work that the foundation is doing is occurring in very targeted communities across the state. Here in New York City, that includes East Harlem, the Lower East Side, and Brownsville, Brooklyn. But universal school lunch could be one of the most sweeping, most impactful pro-child, pro-health actions of all that we could support. You know, our city's public schools serve more than 1 million kids every day, and it's been years and years of advocacy, and today I think we are closer than ever to seeing it really happen here in this city. The City Council has included it in their list of budget priorities. We're in the home stretch, a couple more weeks probably of budget negotiations between the council and the mayor. We have a great lineup of speakers today. So first we're going to hear from Liz Ackles. She's the Executive Director of Community Food Advocates, a grantee of the foundations, and she brings more years than she wants me to say in creating food and income security. So we'll just leave it that way, right?
Yeah.
We are so happy to have Monique Lindsay with us as well today. Monique is a founding member of the Lunch for Learning Parent Caucus, but she's so much more than that. She's been involved in just about everything that seems to affect the well-being of New York City public school students and parental engagement in the system. So thank you both for being here today. And you know, we will be very happy to have Councilmember Ben Kalos with us. He represents the 5th District, and Ben's a lifelong New Yorker and a graduate, proud graduate of our city's public schools, and has been a very outspoken champion of the Lunch for Learning campaign as well. So we're going to have some presentations, hopefully be joined by Ben, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. Okay, so Liz.
That's the right distance.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little echoey, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, David. It's great to be here today, and I can't express our thanks enough to the New York State Health Foundation for the support of our work and the many partners in the room here today for our ability to fight this fight. And so we're very grateful on the many fronts, including, if anyone hasn't seen, the really wonderful Huffington Post piece that David had written. And that just really captures the arguments very well. So I was asked to kind of lay the groundwork. And so I'm going to just take a few minutes and do that and talk a little bit about why universal. Some people in the room know this already, but I'm going to do it again. And what the opportunities are before us, and where we are right now in this budget process. So, and just before I do that, I just want to thank everyone for being here today and spending the time. We have many new faces in the room, but many of our partners who have been so critical to this work and building the campaign from nothing to quite a big voice in the city. Okay, so why universal? So they're basically, universal free school lunch is just the idea that you provide lunch to all students regardless of their income. It's completely consistent with the way public schools are supposed to work, that children are supposed to be provided all services without regard to income. And certainly there should be nothing within the school system that structurally reinforces that. I mean, income plays out in all different kinds of ways, but it shouldn't be that it's something that the school reinforces. And the reason for this is, you know, for decades there's been a division just based, I think, unintentionally on the reimbursement structure from the US Department of Agriculture around school food that divides children by income. And there's an impact on that, and for generations, this is not new, this is not New York City. The stigma of eating school lunch and the poverty stigma associated with it has a direct impact on children's psyches. It has a direct impact on participation. And for children who are in families who are struggling, either deeply or on the margins, this makes a big difference. So just to lay out a few numbers, I won't kill anyone with numbers here, but it's actually over 75% of New York City public school students are eligible for free or reduced price lunch. I still find that number astonishing. And that's a family income below $37,000 a year for a household of 3. So by definition, in this very, very expensive city, families are struggling. So, so that's about 780,000 children, give or take. 250,000 of those children do not participate in the school lunch program. So it's roughly a third. And although there are a variety of factors, we know that, as David mentioned, the most sweeping underlying problem is the poverty stigma. And it's also the one thing that can be most easily solved with really the stroke of a pen. So, and participation drops as children get older. So about 80% of elementary school students eat school lunch. It drops to the mid-60s in middle school, and then it goes down to about 35% in high school. Income range is similar through all. So this has a great impact, and it's and we'll talk about this more. But there are two factors. One is kids in this generation call kids that get online eating free, and it's derisive. It's meant to be insulting. One of the young women involved in the campaign spoke, now that phones are allowed in school, about cyberbullying, about having photos taken and posted on social media. Because kids know, as adults do, whether in mixed income schools or even the lowest income schools, there is an income hierarchy. And so the kids that really need the food and get on the line, everyone knows. So universalizing it and making it free for everyone eliminates that problem. You have to do some things to make sure everyone knows that. That's an important factor. That there's been a change and that it's available to everyone, but that's the big one. The other one that is of equal significance, and we don't talk as much about actually, and starting to do so more, is there are so many families above the income cutoff who are struggling. And the $1.75 a day for the lunch, they can't make. And that has a very direct impact on their parents' participation in their children's schools. And Monique, can talk more about that, and we'll go back and forth, but that,
Welcome, Councilmember Kayla. We'll take just one brief second. Ben does represent the 5th District. It includes the Upper East Side, Roosevelt Island, and parts of East Harlem. As I said before you joined us, Ben is a lifelong New Yorker, graduate of our public schools, a great champion of universal school lunch in the schools. And so Liz was just starting us off, council member, with the issue, and then Monique's going to share her perspective, and then we'd love to hear from you, and then we'll open it up. And Ben's got a busy day filled with more council hearings.
Okay, all right. So there, the other piece is the parent piece that we'll talk more about, and the impact that actually contradicts the this administration's efforts around parent engagement very directly. So what we have before us is an amazing opportunity. The federal government has created incentives to do universal free school lunch. They want New York City and other cities to be doing this. It's a significant easing of paperwork. There is a favorable reimbursement structure, and kids no longer are identified in the cafeteria by their income, either explicitly or subtly. So just to say one other thing, that 92% of school meal costs are covered by, school lunch costs are covered by the federal government. So in the Lunch for Learning campaign's budget ask for this year, and as the city council has been in the budget process, we're asking for an additional $8.75 million to universalize free school lunch to all students. So I'm going to try to keep my remarks not too long so we can have discussion. But in the first year of the campaign, in 2013, we were able to get universal free school lunch in standalone middle schools, so 6th through 8th grade middle schools. They can be co-located with other schools, but it's 6th through 8th grade middle schools. We are very pleased with the results in the first year. About 6%, we think it's a little bit more, but about a 7% increase. That's thousands of more children participating. And that's with very little publicity by the Department of Education. It's been kept very undercover, is the best way to say it. So we, I mean, we'll talk more about this in the discussion, but we are right at the cusp in this budget process in the last week and a half probably to get this done this year. And we have tremendous support among parent leaders. I mean, the outpouring is tremendous. Pediatricians, anti-hunger groups, unions, funders have gotten more involved in the structural, trying to change the structural process, and our students, sorry, my colleagues, Soji and Christina, take the lead in the work. We have amazing student leaders that we work with. I'm going to wrap that for the moment, and we'll come back.
So should I speak?
Sure.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad that you're here. So first, I would like to make something that I noticed when I came here today, is that everyone was so delighted to have the lunch prepared for them. And everyone went to that. First thing they did was go there before they even came into this space. So imagine now, if you're in a school and the food is there, but nobody is on that line trying to get something to eat. How would you feel? And you know that from the morning session to your afternoon lunch session, that you're starting to feel that little twinge in your stomach and you're a little bit hungry and whatever, but nobody is on that line as you were. What would you do? You walk away, because if you take that step, that leap, and be the first person to go and get that lunch, your rest of your day is going to be horrific. Everyone is going to talk about you, and it doesn't stop there the next day and the next day and the next day. So I, as a mother of 2 sons that went through the public school system, who was lower income, my children qualified to get the free and reduced lunch. But my youngest son, from the age of pre-K to high school, never partaked in that, though he was eligible. I prepared his lunch every day and sent it with him until he became a high schooler and took his lunch the first day, and that was a question that we didn't ask. Are you allowed to bring your lunch? And he wasn't. But he didn't know that until he got there that first day, and on the scanner, they would say, you can't bring this here. So what did I do as a parent? I panicked. I thought about my son. I always get emotional because it is hard to know that children who attend a public school have to go hungry. Not that their parents can't prepare food for them at home. Some of them can, some of them can't. I could, but it wasn't allowed for my child. So he went to school every day, eating as much as he could prior to getting to that building. But how much can you eat when you know you have to be to school by 7:30 in the morning? Not much. And he didn't eat anything. And so I, as a parent who was very involved, I went to the school and I wanted to find out why no one was eating the lunch. Now, I was listening to my son with one ear, and then I listened to the school with the other ear, and they didn't know why. But my son would say, Mom, I can't get on that line because they're going to make fun of me. They're going to look at me in a different light. So he said, I'd rather be hungry, because we don't use the word starve, because nobody in these United States should be starving, right? So I would say to him, son, sneak something in. I mean, I was a parent, I was telling him to sneak a granola bar or whatever, but nothing was allowed to pass that scanner. So he participated in every sport. He was on the soccer team, he was on the basketball team, and he was still trying to keep himself afloat so that he could be a good student. So I went to the principal time and time again, and then since I was involved with the Parent-Teacher Association at that school, we decided to bring our children after school. We provided them with granola bars and water and all that thing. Now that was allowed. It was just during that school day that nothing was allowed. So I come before you today to say that, you know what? There is no reason in this universe, and especially in New York City, that our children, whether they can afford to pay for the lunch or they can't, should go to a New York City public school and be hungry. I am so disturbed by that. So we as parents, you know, through Liz and her team, come before you time and time again, and we've sent letters to the mayor and the chancellor, and we're saying that this shouldn't happen. You can't choose middle school over elementary school and high school. Every child should get that lunch. And make it universal so that every child gets on that line and they're high-fiving and they're like, yay, you know, we're united in something. It's not about low income, high income, no income. It's just about children, teens, adolescents, whatever you want to call them, being able to be fed appropriately in a school system that has the money. It's not like we don't have it. We have it. And I will continue to fight. My son is in college, just finished his first semester in a college in Brooklyn, New York, because that's where I'm from. And when I told him I was coming here today and to talk about, he said, you're always advocating for something. And I said, until we can have things go where we don't have to advocate for the basic, I will do it. And then he said to me, and this is the first time my son ever said anything about my advocacy, he said, thank you, Mom. Because kids will not have to go through what I went through and my friends went through in a public high school that should be providing the lunch for every child. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ben, how come you are supporting universal school lunch?
Because it's mostly free. So I want to just apologize for that. I think that's my first coughing fit. I may have tried to eat a bug and it didn't want to get eaten, I'm not sure. But I did want to thank David Sandman for hosting all of us today. Les Eccles for being the advocate on this for longer than I've been here. And also you for sharing your story with us and being an advocate so that folks can hear, because I think if Carmen Farina heard from you and felt that in her heart of hearts it would be hard for her to say no. I also just want to acknowledge Shulamit Warren over in Gail Brewer's office. They do great work. They have a senior food program that I'm incredibly impressed with and want to be Gail when I grow up, so I'm hoping to one day do that. I also want to acknowledge my former food director, Leah Eden, who's here. She's at United Way, but we once a food director, always. And so let's just go to the brass tacks of it on a finance idea. So, whole price tag, $36 million. Some say 92%. At the last budget hearing, the chancellor admitted that it would be at least 80%. So at the very, very brass tacks of it, even if you're a fiscal conservative, it is money we are giving away. If we spent this money, this $36 million, it only cost the city 3.6, because all the rest of it, $33 million, would be coming from the federal government. So that is $33 million that we are not getting to pay New Yorkers, who would then pay income tax, which we could then spend on things like school food. It's money that isn't going into the local farm economy and to local produce. That's goodbye to that $33 million. It's $33 million that is coming out of the pockets of parents who have to pay for food for their children that could otherwise be spending it on other things like food for themselves, food for the rest of the family, and other economic stimulus. And the list goes on. So at the very basic, it's just sound budget sense, which is to get as much money from the federal government into the New York State and New York City economy as possible. And then the second piece, I majored in psychology, and there's this guy called Maslow. And he has this hierarchy of needs, and this room laughing means that I'm in the right room, but most of the time people say, who's Maslow, what's the hierarchy of needs, and how do you prove this? There's actually a lot of social science research. It says, if you take care of food and shelter, then people have a chance to do so much more. And so my answer to a lot of the things that we are seeing in terms of the criminal justice system is we can't not feed people. And so I guess for me, it's just we live in this incredibly wealthy city full of buildings that are huge with billionaires. And then we have children going hungry. And I just want to wake up in a city where 1.1 million children do not have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. And that means free lunch.
So let's stick with the politics side a little bit since you took us there. So you're on board. Most of your council colleagues are on board. How come the mayor and the schools council are not?
So I think the good news is this year she didn't say no. This year I pushed her pretty hard, and she actually said she wouldn't say no. So I think there's traction. We have a bill that I introduced, Introduction 773, which would have school food reporting. I think that while we're pushing for free lunch, if we got that bill passed at the same time, it's funny, in physics, in addition to psychology, I also do physics, there's the observer effect. And the observer effect is that observers affect what they're observing. It really works in quantum mechanics because you can't ping an electron off something without the electron moving, but if people know they're being watched, they act differently. So if you know that you're about to put out a report that everyone gets to see about all the children you're not feeding, hopefully you'd make a different decision in the budget. I think for now, since we're looking at a June or early June budget, it is incumbent on every single person here, every advocate, any person you know who's fighting the fight against hunger, to reach out to their council member, reach out to the speaker, reach out to Carmen Frenia, reach out to the mayor and say, the one thing I want more than anything else is for 1.1 million children not to have to worry where their next meal is coming from. And as it goes, depending on the level, I actually used to work in Chuck Schumer's office, and so they have a counter. And less than 10, that's kind of noise. Break 10, okay, we should start paying attention. Break 50, something's going on here. Break 100, okay, we're starting to really, really pay attention. This matters, and the higher you go in office, the more. So to the extent you can get 10 people to send their own emails, telling their own personal stories, and it can be to the mayor, Carmen Frenia, and their local council member, that will have an impact.
I count about 60 people in the room. So.
Right, but the catch of it is, so each of you 60, hopefully you're all living in all 51 council districts. But as it goes, the electoral politics of it is that if you're not in a council district, it's not going to register. But yes, if all 60 people here in this room emailed Carmen Frenia and Mayor de Blasio today, that would have a huge impact if you'd also copy your council member. And if there's somebody like me, Danny Drum, Steve Levin, who are key partners in this. Danny Drum chairs the Education Committee, Steve Lemon chairs General Welfare. If you copy them and actually say thank you for being a champion. And if your messaging isn't just do this, but actually says thank you for this, that would be even nicer, because elected officials rarely hear those words. Gail Brewer hears it all the time, but the rest of us, not as much. So.
And Liz, I mean, you've been running this campaign for years now. How will people get involved with that in this home stretch period?
Well, I think as Councilmember Kalish said, I think we're at a point of really mobilizing people to reach out to their, it's really right now, it's shoring up the council support, and it's pressing the mayor and the chancellor. I mean, I want to mention that one of the important factors here is that universal free school lunch was one of the mayor's campaign promises. And so we all feel like we're fighting for something that's non-controversial. And for many of us, that's not usually what happens. And against great resistance, sometimes for reasons that we find pretty mind-boggling. So we will have opportunities, reaching out to council members, we will have social media opportunities that we would like to tie people into. But it really is, you know, in some ways politics is a small town. You know, you can make noise in certain ways without huge numbers, you know, and that's what we have the capacity to do in the next, as we've been building, and that we can just kind of keep piling on in the next week and a half.
So let's go back to the substance a little bit, right? So universal school lunch is not a new or unheard of phenomenon. There's a lot of reasonably sized cities in New York State who do it. There are some other big cities across the country who do it. So, you know, what's going on in those places? What's the experience been like?
Participation is, wherever universal takes place, participation goes up. And under the federal community eligibility provision, more money comes in proportionally for those meals. So it's the best way to describe community eligibility provision is a federal incentive program to do universal free school lunch. So just naming some of the cities, so Boston, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Dallas, there are a bunch of places that this is happening. And this is where we have this opportunity that feels like it's from the federal government, that feels like it's being not taken advantage of, and it has both an easing of paperwork and an increased reimbursement structure. So even more federal money structure to come in, the more children eat.
And what about in New York State? I understand Albany, Rochester.
Albany, Rochester, Poughkeepsie, Buffalo, Syracuse, Hempstead is what I know off the top of my head. I think that was the last round that I knew of. Also successful, the numbers go up, you know, participation rates go up, and you know, to maximize the numbers, you have to put an effort in, but to universal alone, without any change in menu, without any change in cafeteria environment, the numbers bump. You can then do other things to add to that. And just one additional piece of information just to say this. New York City has an old version of universal free school lunch that has been, for lack of a better term, applied ad hoc. It's been in place since the 80s. It's called Provision 2. And how it works a little bit differently than the current model. And it's kind of scattered throughout the city. And in the high schools, there are about 19 high schools that have universal free school lunch through Provision 2. The participation rate of students in those schools, in the school lunch program, is about 50%, as opposed to 34% in most of the other high schools. And that reflects out in middle schools as well. The children, the few middle school students who don't have universal, the participation is about in the mid 40%, and then it's in the mid 60% with the students who started universal last year. And then the children who've had it a little bit longer under this older provision, the numbers are in the 70%. So it takes, you know, in terms of substance and arguments, that what we've heard repeatedly from the administration is that the numbers haven't gone up enough. And, I mean, just frankly, we find that to be disingenuous, because to the administration's own admission, doing it just in middle schools and just in standalone middle schools is both confusing to parents and self-limiting to how it can be promoted. It would, you know, if you take a model of a new exciting program that was promoted, it's universal pre-K. And if you just did that and didn't tell folks and didn't have a way of just, I mean, there is an incredible publicity machine around it, as it should be. But if you're starting something, universal free school lunch, I mean, has the potential to be truly transformational. You have to put something behind that to make that happen. And so if by definition you're creating a catch-22 by saying the numbers haven't gone up, but we're not talking about it because it's here, and then the notion that you're not expanding it to all students because the performance hasn't been enough, which we disagree with anyway, is, I don't know what you even call that. It's unreasonable. It's not a real reason. I mean, you know, if you have a real reason, give a real reason.
All right, well, let me ask Monique a question, and then I'll open it up for everybody else. So, Monique, I mean, you spoke with a lot of emotion about how it makes the kids feel, you know, in their school day and the effect on them. What about parents? I mean, does it make them feel more alienated from this school if they feel like, I owe them these fees for lunch, I don't even want to go there because it feels like visiting the bill collector? Like, what do parents say about this?
So it actually does become like visiting the bill collector. Parents are telling us that the ones that have to pay, that sometimes you fall behind in it, and that you don't feel comfortable, you know, going to the school or sending your child with it to pay. And then we have our immigrant parents who sometimes don't want to even fill out certain forms because, you know, they don't want their status to be known. So we are finding that a lot of parents are really totally flabbergasted that this hasn't, you know, came to be. It's not out there so that everybody can get it. And the parents that pay says sometimes that it's just like anything else. You know, you put paying it aside because you figure they're going to feed my child regardless. And the fact is that they don't feed your child. If that money is not paid up in a certain time, your child is basically ridiculed again because that free lunch, that lunch is not going to be given to them. We have cases where parents say they have fallen so far behind that your child will not even get a certificate of graduation because you have not fulfilled your obligation to the school. And it doesn't make any sense. Parents are struggling, whether you're above water or below, parents are still struggling in some degree. You know, you got to think about parents who have more than one child. So therefore, I have to pay for this school and whatever, and you have to tell your children all kinds of things you have to tell your children to do so that, you know, they're not affected. I have a friend who just got a job working in the in her not even her child's school, but working in the cafeteria. And she came and told me, now it's been 3 months, and she said, you know, I'm ready to resign. And I'm like, what happened? And she said, we throw away so much food. And she said, I can't believe that we still have children that are on those lines, you know, not taking the food, but some kids do. And the ones that they're not allowed to even give them an extra crumb. And she said, but we have to stand there and dump this food into the trash every single day. She said, I don't think I can do this much longer. It's too much. I needed a job so desperately, but this is not the way to go.
Okay, well, let's open it up to the audience, and if you could just tell us who you are and fire away at anyone you like. Yes.
Hi, I'm Rachel Knockleff, and my synagogue is a great admirer of this program, and before I retired, I had a health administration degree. So I would like to give you a question, Mr. Sandman. It seems to me that talk about being disingenuous, if people don't eat, they're at risk for disease. This is a public health issue, and although Lunch for Learning did a superb job marshaling pediatricians and other health experts to talk about this. Isn't there another section of the mayor's government that should be outraged? That should say, this is wrong. We can't have our children undernourished in a city where any germ from around the world can come marching in. And you would be the one to know.
I can't speak for the administration, of course. The mayor speaks for the administration as to his commissioners, but I'm sure there is a difference of opinion in any administration on almost any issue. So you find your friends where you can. Other questions? Yes.
Lorraine Gonzalez, Children's Defense Fund. Was just curious, I guess this question would be for Liz, if apart from making school lunch universal, that whether your organization had a position in terms of content, food content and nutritional value, and things of that nature.
Yeah, so, the city has to follow very strict federal nutrition guidelines, so it's a very strict guideline. For us, the concern is the appeal of the food. So it's kind of twofold. One is, is the food appealing? And, one of the things that's happened, this is another policy issue, is that when the nutrition standards went up under the 2010 Child Nutrition Act, I'm shortening that a lot, and that was the same act that that community eligibility was put in, the nutrition standards went up. Very good thing. The city, for not unreasonable reasons, went to a uniform menu. So, with a few exceptions, all children, the menu is the same throughout the city. And that has really taken away some of the food diversity in terms of what's appealing to children in different communities. There was more ability to tailor meals to children from different ethnic groups, or just make things that for a different school might be more appealing. So that's something that the administration is trying to deal with, and something that we would like to figure out with them, like how to do that in a way that's cost effective, meet that. And then in addition, with the young people, one of the big concerns, lots of times when you ask students about school food, they'll immediately say, it's disgusting, I don't want it. And some of that is the appeal of the food. We think a lot of that is the stigma attached to the food. If you really dig underneath it, that the whole thing is stigmatized, and so that, but there are appeal issues. Look, if you're providing 650,000 lunches a day, providing institutional food it's a major deal. And I think the food in many places have gotten better, but that is a piece of work that we're looking to expand into more substantially, actually with young people in particular and parent leadership in the campaign, to try to work with the Department of Education in that way to make sure the food is more appealing.
I think there's a question in the back.
Greg Silverman from Wellness in the Schools. I just want to add on to that question a bit. It seems, and I've worked in access work and breakfast and after school and summer and lunch across the country, we see the same thing. We have great levers that we can pull to increase participation, but that doesn't necessarily increase at the level we want of consumption. And the question is, how can there's a piece of federal money, but I wonder if in the city, is there access to dollars for training and technical assistance, which is, I think, a key piece to be able to implement these menus in a way that we end up raising money for. We have chefs here in the room who work for Wellness in Schools who help to change the menu. Because the Office of School Food doesn't have the time or resources to do what's necessary, because, as you said, it's an institutional process. There's thousands of staff who need support. There's a lot of groups in this room who want to help with that, but I think if there was some levers to draw down some funds, that would be a great way to make that happen.
Do you want to take that? It's sort of a budget question.
Do you have something first?
I don't. I'm happy for you to take that.
So for me, priority one is universal lunch. Let's just make sure it's there, number one priority. Once we have it there, we can start focusing on the calories, the appeal. When we did our hearing on the school food, they brought the menus. Frankly, I'm concerned about the menus because if you coat it in sugar or salts, it will be appealing somehow, or that appears to be the menu, and so I'm very concerned about that piece, but I'm more concerned about hunger. So first, let's make sure that the food is there. The second piece is then we can start drilling down, and then I have 18 schools in my district. One of the things I ask to see every time I go to a school is let me see your cafeteria. So I have 18 different principals, 18 different types of principals, and I have a handful who are like, one of the big things I care about is school food. And so if they're on the phone with the Office of School Food, then I want to go to get lunch there. If they're not on the phone with the Office of School Food every day, then you're looking at the salad bar comes from cans. So one side, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fresh everything. On the other hand, canned. So I think that is a challenge, and if we could try to, hopefully the legislation, if we can pass it, will create some equity so we can start to see the differences between the schools. And then along the lines of, for WITS, I'm familiar with your program. So city council members have member item funding. As it goes, it's a couple of $100,000, and that goes to funding Meals on Wheels. It funds Grow NYC fresh food box programs, which is something I do. It funds the green markets in my district. It funds the senior centers. It funds everything, and that's the pot that you'd be competing against. But generally, if you could figure out a way to get your program in at $5,000 or $10,000, that's going to be something that might be manageable for elected officials, especially if you're coming on as a new program. But I know in the case of your program, as soon as you're at $16,000 or $32,000, you're looking at 10% of all the allocation the council member has, and then you're looking at equity between the 18 schools, because that's something like 16 to 32 per school, and that's more money than the council member may have. So in terms of the additional resources, if you're able to get matching funds from donors, if you're able to get matching funds from another source, there is the member item funding. There's also an initiative program that's out there that gets rolled out. It had been expanding, it's now getting scaled back, but there is city money. There's also state money. The state assembly just got their member item funding back. I think right now it's just mainly capital. Occasionally there's a sprinkling of expense here and there, but that's where elected officials may have some money. And then PTAs actually have some money that you wouldn't expect. I have PTAs in my district that raise $1,000, and I have PTAs in my district that raise $250,000. So again, lots of different folks, but there's lots of money there in different places, and so just seeing what people are interested in investing their dollars in.
I think, I would like to just say something. I think that we need to get away from that, because we just want universal lunch, free lunch, healthy lunch for all children. I would say that in my child's school, when I went and started investigating and asking, what they did was we had got some funds. And they took that funds and they redid the whole cafeteria. It was magnificently beautiful. That did not have, the children still didn't go in. Those teenagers would not go in. It was so beautiful, but they wouldn't go in because that stigma was still there. So that's why we keep talking about the universal free lunch, because all kids didn't go into that cafeteria, because there would be no one standing in the corner saying freebie, freebie, or whatever else they say to you.
Free.
Free, right. Free. But there's a lot of different names that are said. So I think that missing the point of that we just want it to be universal. So every single public school would have that, because some PTAs can raise $1,000 to $10,000, but then the majority of them can't raise that type of money. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, it's still going to be an imbalance of who can and who can't. We just want everyone to come together, the mayor, the chancellor, to say this has to be done across the board. The mayor made promises. That's where the parents come in. The mayor made a promise that when if he became mayor, that he would implement universal free lunch. I remembered that. And I said to myself when he made that statement, after I knew that he made that statement, I said, wow, I remember as a kid being promised things, and that didn't happen. So when you promise something to someone, you have to keep that promise, because otherwise people look at you in a different light. So right now, if he doesn't implement it and have his chancellor put it out there to the schools, then we as parents are not going to have the same light about him as we've had in the past.
I have a question. Ben brought up principals, and you have done a survey of principals or something, right?
No, we haven't done a survey, but we, the principals union, as the teachers union, have been on board from the beginning. We also meet and talk to principals all the time, either at parent meetings as well as superintendents. And principals are across the board fully in support of universal free school lunch. It simplifies things, in a very basic way. It simplifies their administrative burdens, and principals very explicitly don't want to play bill collector with families. They know what that means. It's incredibly time consuming. It's not the kind of relationship a school wants to have with a parent, the Council for School Supervisors and Administrators is the principals union, they've been full force on board from the beginning, and really want this to happen for all students.
Laura, share a question?
Yes. So I want to expand on your point. What's your name?
Rachel.
Rachel's point. I am a mother of 3. And for me, one of the biggest sales for this is the capacity to learn, but it's also the health benefits of having the lunch. So we've talked a lot about hunger as being the driving reason for the campaign. But could you talk a little bit about the other important reasons? Because as we're trying to rally other allies, we need to expand our
Yes.
way of talking about it.
So I'll just get us started, and then just to say, when we started building this campaign, one of the things that, we were thinking about was there are a lot of anti-hunger groups that work on these issues, and we are the usual suspects. But this is an issue that has a broad impact. So who else can weigh in? So educators, education advocates, people involved in the health field, folks that have not traditionally weighed in so much on school food issues. And it's been amazing, the support that we've gained. So we know that right, hunger is a, has so many, and poverty, poverty really is what we're talking about here, has such an impact on everything, and on people, a child's ability to focus in a particular day, but also what that means for their life, their mental health, their physical health. So we've been doing a lot of focusing. It's the physical well-being, because if you're not eating in school and your family doesn't have enough money, and look, we know for people that are involved in emergency food, our colleagues here, the amount of people in the city that rely on emergency food from food pantries and soup kitchens, families, to fill the gap. It's sometimes 2 weeks of the month, sometimes a week of the month, is enormous. So emergency food system that was an emergency food system is really how people sustain themselves in terms of the trying to make ends meet in a city that's very hard to make ends meet. So by definition, people are struggling, and a lot of people are struggling, and a lot of parents with children are struggling. So you have this school food system that, you'd like to think that's not one of the roles that it would have to play, is kind of filling that need. But it can and it should. It's disgraceful that 75% of New York City public school students are income eligible for free or reduced price lunch, just in terms of the poverty rates in the city. But that's what it is, and then you have this. So one of the things we have done more focusing on is the mental health aspects, both the torment and bullying of children in schools and the anxiety and stress that that produces. And then, you know, if you don't have food and you're not eating, you know, I'm not a researcher, but there's been information that's come out more and more about children being more vulnerable to mental health challenges when they're in food insecure households. So these are all things that are just so consistent with the mayor's agenda, which is our frustration, and clearly the council's agenda. And it's the council that has been moving this, along with the public advocate. So, you know, it is multi-tiered, and it you know, it's school function, it's health function, it's mental health function. And, you know, we don't need studies to say that. If you don't eat, you're angry, you're annoyed, you're short-tempered, we all are. This is not a childhood thing. So we see this as, in this city budget, which is $82 billion, as such a small investment in a city where, and both mayoral administration and a council, where equity is so fundamental, and educational equity. And how do you even approach that when kids are ashamed to kids who are hungry are ashamed, and, you know, ashamed to go online. And teenagers, one of the things that, you know, people say, oh, if kids are hungry enough, they're gonna eat. Teenagers will say, I'm not hungry. I'm not hungry, I don't like it, it's nasty, it's and that's huge.
I think Ben, you're answering.
Sure. I just saw in the back of the room my current food policy director, Debbie Wisniewski. When I run to my hearing, please touch base with her about anything. I think one thing just to take on the health aspects head on, obesity is a symptom of hunger. It's not something that people understand. It's not common sense, I guess. It's something we need to fight a better battle on, but our own New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene has found that half of all elementary children are overweight. Half. So CDC is very clear. We've had an argument with McDonald's about this, but CDC is pretty clear. McDonald's disagrees. But diets high in calories, saturated fat, sodiums are major contributors to obesity and chronic diet-related illnesses like type 2 diabetes. And diabetes is one of those fun places where that's just going to devastate us on Medicaid. The city spends about $6 billion a year on our share of Medicaid. So every dollar we invest in these 1.1 million children eating free lunch, universal lunch, in elementary school, where we are already seeing an epidemic of obesity, of children being overweight early in life, and there's more and more science coming out that says the pounds you put on are harder and harder to take off, and eventually your body finds an equilibrium. They did this fantastic study about folks from Biggest Loser. But so when you talk about health effects, the dollars we invest, the whopping $3.6 million that we invest in this will bring us back $33 million from the federal government, and can potentially save us billions in Medicaid dollars from obesity-related illnesses.
Lucy, and then we'll go back and then Amy.
Lucy Friedman, Expanded Schools, formerly the After School Corporation, and I totally support this, and hoping that as you win this one, and the next priority would be making sure that kids get supper if they stay for an expanded day, a longer day after school. It's in one of the few uncapped entitlements from the federal government, and we find resistance from schools, from sometimes even our community partners, say, oh, supper takes more time than snack, but supper comes with 5 different kinds of food, and you know, particularly if we can solve the appealing problem of it, make it both nutritious and appealing, I think it makes sure that kids have 3 meals a day, and maybe even then a 4th if they get home. But it's been a frustration of mine that this uncapped entitlement isn't taken advantage of, and it is universal already. So.
Lift to top.
Okay, let's do that.
Someone else? Yes.
Just one comment, you're next. So it's free lunch, breakfast after the bell, supper. and 3.3 million meals for 1.1 million children who will not have to worry about anything because they're getting 3 square meals a day.
Perfect.
So
I'm Jan Covendick from the CUNY Urban Food Policy Institute at the CUNY School of Public Health, and I just wanted to add another element to the health impact of moving to universal. Because when kids eat the healthy school food, and if we get rid of the burden on principals of verifying eligibility and collecting unpaid school lunch fees, we'll have more principals that'll be the kind that Councilmember Kalos described, who are school food friendly, and fewer principals who are in the school food antipathy category. There's a long history there. But once we have universal, and it becomes the norm in the school day, we have to let this year's seniors and next year's seniors graduate off, but starting with the kids for whom everyone will eat. It will be the norm. We will be displacing a lot of that unhealthy food that kids bring into school with them. Monique's child's school didn't let other food in the door, but lots of kids stop at the corner store on the way to school and bring unhealthy food in. So, we're going to be displacing unhealthy food as well as expanding participation in the healthy food. The other thing I want to say is what we hear from around the country, from cities that have implemented this citywide, which is what we want New York to do, is that it eases the school food budget and allows more of the money to go for the purchase of healthier foods. So we won't have as many salad bars that are relying on canned beans, because there will be, the higher the participation rate, the lower the unit cost of providing the meal, the more money there is that can be invested in farm to cafeteria, in fresh food, in using the WITS menu and training staff. So we hear great reports from other cities in the country. Take a look at San Diego Unified, take a look at what's happened in Detroit, despite all the stress in Detroit. There's a whole new world of school food waiting for us out there once we get beyond this bar.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to take a question from Amy. I'm going to let each of you have one final word, and then we're going to wrap up so you can get to your hearing on time. So, Amy.
It's really exciting for me to be here. I'm Amy Schwartz from Syracuse University and the Institute for Education and Social Policy here in New York. And it's exciting because I'm one of those people who comes out of doing research on education, educational outcomes, and for about the last 5 years, have been doing work on the relationship between school food and academic outcomes, and looking at the provision to schools. And so we are in the middle of a study which is not written, and I'm hoping to get it done this summer. It's over, but I think what we hope to provide, and I think we're going to show, is that moving to universal free meals at the school level, not across, but a provision to improves academic performance. Now the big question I get when I talk to people a little bit about this around the country at academic forums, maybe more education, is what about obesity? Because there is work out there that shows that school lunch increases obesity. And so it's a challenge. I mean, we haven't done that yet. It's on our agenda. But I do think it's, we have to sort of be thoughtful about why it is that people resist, where are these other people coming from. So I think there is room for more research. I think we do need to do it. That said, I've been getting on every morning for a really long time and doing that work. So I think that's the exciting next thing. If we do this, how are we going to know what works? For whom? How much? How much more is it? How much this, 9 million versus how many more teachers? Is it worth it? Probably, right? If we could show academic outcomes for everybody, these are big effects. So I want to say, there's a really great opportunity to do this. School food has been an incredible partner in doing this work.
Yes.
So I would give a shout out to them on just being incredibly supportive for the research. DOE, DOHMH, incredibly supportive.
Yes.
I think we'd be in a really nice place to show evidence of success.
Thank you. So let me give each of you a chance for a last word, and while you have them, if you've persuaded people, let them know what they can do in these final weeks that remain. Ben.
Email the mayor, email Frenia, email your council member. Don't take no for an answer.
So, as a parent, I don't want to do this. I'm hearing an echo in my ear. As a parent and part of the parent caucus for Lunch for Learning, we're just gonna say, keep your promise, Mayor de Blasio. You cannot disappoint the parents of New York City public school children and our children and their schools by not granting us this universal, free, healthy, nutritious, whatever you want to say, lunch. And we will continue to advocate until it is done. We are hoping that by this budget going in, there will be complete universal lunch for our children in the New York City public schools. Thank you.
So I'll just say, just to add on to what Monique said, and then I'll say what people can do. One thing I just want to say, we have incredible support for the campaign, but one of the things we have built over this last year is the parent caucus. And I think this is relevant to here. We have every citywide parent leadership body within the Department of Education has signed on to the campaign, has been actively involved. We have every borough represented by parent organizations, borough-based, and over 20 very economically diverse school districts. There is incredible force behind this. It is frustrating that this hasn't resonated more strongly with the mayor, that these are parents representing 1.1 million children, right? You know, so I just wanted to say that because I think that's among our work, which is pretty big and with many partners here, that's a very important piece of this. So I will echo what Councilman Kalo said, but in a practical sense, if it's okay with the New York State Health Foundation, if we have the list, we would like to send emails to folks and we can kind of give you information and updates so that in this next few weeks you have the information to kind of get things out to folks and help spread that around. So, you know, in terms of the mayor, the chancellor, council members, but it's really a matter of, again, it doesn't have to be hundreds of thousands of people. It could really be in different districts, you know, a little bit more than a handful in a way. And so, you know, that if you can do that and mobilize your family, friends, colleagues, that could make a difference in what happens. And so we have materials prepared, you know, that we're sharing and could share that with you. So.
Okay, and I think we've distributed to everybody on your seat something from the campaign, so you know how to get in touch with them. So we're going to leave it there. Thanks to all three of you so much.
Thank you.